our partners,
Good
our
morning.
colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us today. Believe it or not, this is the 29th of February. This only comes around every 4 years. As we know, this is a leap year. And I did say at the beginning of the year to our members on another webinar that we are in for an exciting year. I believe it strongly. I feel it. Some in the Christian fraternity may say, even sense it. This is going to be an exciting year for us here in this country and for the business community as well. So we thought, what better day to have our February webinar than on the very last day, the 29th in this leap year. So a pleasant good morning to you. Welcome to all of you who have taken the time out this morning to join us for this session. And for those of you who may not know, I am Lynette Holder. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Small Business Association of Barbados, and it is my pleasure to host this session today. This is a part of our members' educational series. Every month, we organize a webinar on a particular topic of interest to the small business sector and, by extension, the private sector here in Barbados. And well, since COVID, our sessions now take the form of the online platform, a webinar, because COVID has really shown us that we didn't have to meet face to face for every activity, but that we can, resort to the digital platform. And so this allows us to even engage more persons in our sessions on a monthly basis. So we're very pleased that you have taken the time to spend this hour with us. Now, again, in housekeeping, our webinars are all recorded, and in the event that you miss any aspect of it, fear not. You can go to our Facebook page. After, you can also go to our YouTube channel. Let me encourage that you subscribe to our YouTube page as well. And either of these platforms, you can watch the webinar at your convenience. So even if you miss anything, fear not. The sessions are recorded, inclusive, obviously, of the slides that will be presented by our speaker today. Now, at the end of our session, we will invite you to stay on for an extra 5 minutes. We want to hear from you, so please stay on the call and complete a very short evaluation survey that will give us some critical information on the session and will help also in our planning for the remainder of this year. So with those few words, colleague, let me get out of the way, as the saying goes, and let's get to our session today. Remember, this is a part of our members education series. It is our monthly webinar for February. And again, we're bringing a topic we hope of interest to you, given all that has been said recently about the new tax regime for the small business sector and for the private sector, for the business community at large. We felt that it was important for us to sit down and have this conversation today. Members would recall that last November we began the conversation around the amendments to the National Insurance Scheme, and we gave a commitment that come this first quarter in 2024, we will continue this conversation. And we're doing so now looking at the tax regime overall for the business community. And I'm very pleased today that we have Mrs. Marilyn Husbands, and Mrs. Husbands is the Deputy Chairman of the Tax Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados. She comes very well equipped to be able to address this topic and help us to distill this topic today. A little bit, I'm sure you will want to know about our presenter. Ms. Husband, tax partner at Ernst & Young in Barbados. And she became a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados in April of 2001 and is a practicing member of ICAB, as well as a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. She was first elected to the council in 2019 and is currently as I said, the deputy chair of their tax committee, having served on this committee since 2012. Marilyn has over 27 years in the provision of audit and tax services in the financial services, retail, manufacturing, distribution, banking, insurance, hospitality, and telecommunication sectors in Barbados and the OECS sub-region. She is a certified learning leader in the EY Caribbean practice, where she focuses on developing the knowledge and expertise of professionals across varying levels and backgrounds. So from that short bio, you will agree with me that our speaker today is very well able, competent enough to help us distill this topic, understanding the new tax rate for small businesses. Members would recall the recent ministerial statement by the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs in the Parliament of Barbados. And from then, we've been getting lots of calls, lots of queries. We want to know more about this new regime. And that's what we're going to discuss today. So without any further ado, colleagues, members of the associations and friends who've joined us today, it is my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Marilyn Husbands to share with us on this theme, understanding the new tax rate for small businesses. Over to you, Mrs. Husbands, and she's going to be aided by a PowerPoint presentation in her discourse today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Good morning to all. It's certainly a pleasure to be here and to be representing ICAB and to be partnering with the Small Business Association. This journey of taxation has been an exciting one for some, maybe a dreaded one for others, and it just happens to be one that none of us can avoid. So at this time, I will just start my presentation. We hope to have an informative presentation, one that's productive and that everyone can benefit from. If we don't have all the answers here today, we assure you that we'll go find them for you and share with the association. Okay. So as I said, I represent ICAB here this morning, and we are going through the understanding the new tax regime, or rather the changes within the tax regime and how it affects the small businesses. So today we'll cover an overview of the global and domestic tax landscape, because unlike years gone by, our tax landscape is not just our domestic environment, but it's certainly influenced a lot by the international landscape. Then we'll go through the changes to the Barbados tax regime, those changes that are applicable to small businesses. We want to understand what is a small business under the Small Business Development Act, and also to understand what's the process of being registered under the Act. There are responsibilities that members have once you have registered under the Act, and the impact of those changes on small businesses. So let's start a little bit by talking about the global landscape. Now, COVID-19, if nothing else, made us recognize that the world is a very, very small place. And what happens in one jurisdiction can easily affect another jurisdiction. So, and this is very similar to what's happening in the tax landscape today. 10 years ago, we heard about harmful tax practices, profit shifting, things like that, where jurisdictions wanted to ensure that profits derived in their jurisdictions aren't being shifted to another jurisdiction and the taxes then being collected by another jurisdiction. Today, that was something that we heard about. Today, this is coming home. It's no longer something we hear about. The world has become smaller, economies are digitalized, and this influences how our domestic tax regime has to change and to be agile. So we go through talked about the global tax climate. So all these changes that have taken place within the global arena, Barbados has no choice. It really isn't a choice anymore, but to understand what is happening and to adjust to these changes and bring them home to ensure that as a nation, we remain relevant, competitive, agile. And this has created the need for tax reform. You would remember 2018, we had significant changes. Seemed as though we settled for 5 years and now we're back to another set of changes. And you may ask, how long will this continue? It'll continue for a while longer. 2024 is just the beginning. 2025, other countries join the international reform of Pillar 2. And then, depending on what one country does, another country may shift what they do. Investors will change how they invest. And all of these things, though it seem as though they don't necessarily affect our small businesses, because from small businesses, we think about micro businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, all a part of the Small Business Association. But at the same time, as much as you may not pay attention as the small business community, and some of you do, I take it for granted that many of you do, but we need to monitor. We need to pay attention because it will affect you. It will affect you because the companies will have to adjust as Barbados adjusts to the changing landscape in the international arena, trying to become more compliant in line with international standards, doing business in line with international standards. And to do that, you have to be regulated. To be able to have a handle on what is happening in the corporate environment in Barbados, the government will be required to ensure that they have some line of sight of the activities are taking place within the corporate environment in Barbados. And the small businesses make up a large collection of those entities. You may feel as though you're small, yes, you're doing your thing on the side, but just as the international affects our domestic environment is made up of all types of entities, some multinationals, some domestic, some sole traders, all types of entities. And this change, with the changes coming in the environment, pay attention, monitor, listen to the news, listen to the parliamentary discussions around it. So now I want to go on to, having set the context of what I believe resulted in many of the changes, I want to go through the recent changes to the Barbados tax regime. That there was reference made to the ministerial statement made on November 7th by our Prime Minister. And she did lay out some changes to the Barbados tax rates. And then there were some regimes that fell outside of what we call the standard corporate tax rate. So we recall we would have had tiered rates and tiered revenue, taxable income as well to match them, going from 5.5 to 1%. But now we've come to a standard corp tax rate of 9%, influenced a lot by Pillar 2, the BEPS regimes, all the changes taking place globally. But within this, there is still the concept within government to continue to develop entities, hold the investment, but at the same time, be sure to not leave out our small businesses or domestic environment, and to ensure that businesses can adapt, they can still be profitable, people still remain employed, because all of the businesses within the Barbados arena make up our society, our families, influences income. So falling outside of the change in the standard tax rate, we have insurance companies, international shipping companies, in scope multinational enterprises, and small businesses registered under the Small Business Development Act. And today we're talking about specifically small businesses, but all of these regimes have tax rates that differ from the standard corporate tax rate of 9%. So I'll take time to focus on the changes in the regime that are applicable to small businesses. So we know from January 2024, small businesses are eligible to be taxed at 5.5% of their taxable income. Many of us will be able to identify whether we meet the gross income amount of 2 million. But many people are puzzled by, am I registered? Is being a member of the Small Business Association the same as being registered on the Small Business Development Act? That may seem like an obvious question, but those were questions that were asked. Like, how do I register? If the Small Business Association registration doesn't allow me to access 5.5%, what does? And the legislation, well, the announcement and the draft legislation speaks to being registered under the Small Business Development Act. And that's what we'll look at today, because these are the two things that you need to, this is the criteria that you need to make sure you've addressed in order to be able to benefit from a tax rate of 5.5 versus being taxed at the standard corporate rate of 9%. Now, monthly prepayments. I feel like this is a change. No, I feel like, no, this is a change and will be for many small businesses. But you will find as I go through that the changes that are being made will cause small businesses to make changes to the way we do things. Changes to how you manage your books, how you manage your cash flow. You know, you just don't receive and spend all. You have to figure out how you meet your obligations. And if there's anything we take away from here today, is that this new tax rate, when you understand the impact on small businesses, it comes down to compliance. It really comes down to compliance. So for income year 2024, the due dates for prepayments remain the same. You would see my title is monthly prepayments, but this is because I want you to focus on what I need to tell you next. So right now and prior, companies with year ends from January to September would make a prepayment in September. Companies with year ends from October to December would make 2 prepayments in December and March, filing their return in June. And the returns for the January to September entities would normally be filed March 15th. But it is expected, and it was announced, that all companies, all businesses are required to make monthly prepayments based on the previous year's taxable income from 2025. In my mind, this is new. New for small businesses, but nothing that you can ignore. You have to pay attention because right away, this is managing cash flow. Can't wait now until the end to pay, but you have a year to figure it out. So let's go into what's the small business under the Small Business Development Act. And this is important. This is the one criteria that you will need to meet in order to be able to benefit from the 5.5%. These businesses include, 1, incorporated companies under the Companies Act. This is important because a sole trader doesn't qualify. So if your company is you have a small business, you're a sole trader, this doesn't apply to you. So you may have to set back now and say, do I want to plan differently? Do I want to think about my next steps? Then businesses that satisfy any two of the following: not more than $1 million stated or paid in capital, not more than $2 million in annual sales, and not more than 25 employees. First criteria, examine your business. Do you qualify? If you qualify, then there's more for you. And here, this is now subject to these things. And this is really to guarantee that there are no large entities that are not within the scope of the criteria outlined below before that then are investing in small businesses and really and truly is a larger entity controlling the small business. So small businesses need to pay attention as to who their investors are and whether it kicks you out of the loop. So it doesn't apply to larger companies, larger groups at all. And then not in a case where you have management fees being paid out in normal course of business, where my thought around it is that this is really strategic. This is strategic management. Somebody is strategically managing this small business from outside. And for that reason, they're being paid a managerial fee. Those companies, no. Those are not companies that would qualify. So make sure you understand the criteria and make sure that you examine where you fit within it so you can plan. So I want to talk about the process to be registered on the Small Business Development Act. And this has been much contentiously discussed. It was much a contention, and it has been discussed over and over and over again as to how onerous this process is. Now, took it upon myself to find out how onerous it could be. And based on my findings, which discussion with the Ministry of Energy and Business Development, this process is not supposed to be an onerous process. It is not intended to be an onerous process. And my question was, well, that's not the messaging that you're hearing. It seems as though a lot of this delay is influenced by incomplete information being submitted with applications. So when you are making your application, you need to ensure that you submit it along with complete information. And ideally, the process should take about 2 weeks. When you get published as a statutory instrument, maybe another 2, I don't know, 4 weeks, stretching it. But the process shouldn't take very, very long. So once you've submitted, and this is in the ideal world, of course, I'm not there with you or with the ministry going through the process, but this is ideally not intended to be an onerous process from what I've gathered. So the process includes the submission of the prescribed application forms. And honestly, the Small Business Development Act is very, very well laid out. There are actually examples of these applications, so you can tell what information is required. There are 2 different types of applications. One's for entities that have only been established for less than 1 year, and then for those who are established more than 1 year. And it is just to go through in detail to make sure that you have what is required. Remember I talked about being compliant? This is where it makes a difference. Compliance from the perspective of filing your tax returns, making sure if you have employees, you're paid up on your national insurance. The application requests incorporation documents, certificate of incorporation, the articles of incorporation, the notice of directors, notice of address, things like that you need to have available and submit with your application. Tax clearance certificates from the Barbados Revenue Authority and the National Insurance. Right away comes to mind, the Barbados Revenue Authority will issue tax clearances to say that all of your taxes have been discharged, all your returns have been filed, the National Insurance to say you have no liabilities with them. Now, audited financial statements, if your gross assets or revenue exceed $1 million, those are required. And the question will come, but the Companies Act says 4 million. This is separate and distinct. This is required. If your company does not generate revenue over $1 million or have assets over $1 million, then only a review engagement is required. A review engagement is not quite an audit, but just want the guarantee is to say you've had an independent review and they agree that the financial statements you have are in alignment with reporting standards, international financial reporting standards. And for those entities where the company has been established for less than 1 year, projections that for a 3-year period, so the small business, so that the minister can assess whether the company will be viable and trading, things like that. And we always be mindful, additional information can be requested. Now, it talks about these statements are expected to be done by qualified accountants. The Act refers to accountants who are members of ICAB or is approved somewhere in CARICOM. So you need to pay attention to who you hire, although from the names I'm seeing, there are many accountants sitting on this call today, this webinar today. So you need to make sure that who you're engaging to do your accounts, that person is qualified to do it, and you wouldn't end up with costs that you don't need. These are the details of the application. I wouldn't go through every single one, but when you think about it, let me go back. When you think about it, I don't know if you've heard, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the requirements for you to file your annual returns for CAIPO. You would have heard CAIPO talking about the UBO, the ultimate beneficial owner, making sure that they can say who the shareholders in the companies are, the directors are, what their address, where they live, the shares that's held by each shareholder within the company, things like that. These are things that CAIPO would request. And if you make changes to, you will have to inform them. This application pretty much is asking for the similar information that you should already have available. So some things will probably talk up to your business plan and the investments you intend to make so that the minister gets a good understanding of the purpose of the business and what you expect to generate and those kinds of things and where it's going and how it contributes to the socio-economic environment within Barbados, which is the basis on which the minister, you'll see, he would approve the application. So the approval process, which I've been told shouldn't take very long, provided you have provided complete information. Seems as though the delay is often due to the fact that complete information is not provided. So the minister may declare a small business approved where the application has been made as prescribed, meet the criteria that I outlined before, with respect to being considered a small business, and that the company carries on an activity that have a significant socioeconomic influence on Barbados. And that's basically you contribute to the welfare and the economic growth and development of Barbados. This act is primarily around the development and growth of businesses in Barbados. Once your application has been approved, you'll submit a declaration about your business, and this is published in the official gazette. This is providing, once all the necessary processes are completed, and you pay a fee of $100, which is quite small, but this act was initiated in 2007, so you could understand years gone by. And once all this process has been completed, the company will be listed in a register of small businesses. You'll be assigned a number, and your certificate of registration will be issued. Now, responsibilities of the small business once you're approved. This status does not come without responsibilities. Remember, we talked at the beginning about having a regulatory environment that you can account for business, government being able to have a line of sight of the businesses in Barbados, and just knowing that they are compliant. This is international standard. Compliance is becoming just internationally required. And if we're going to remain competitive and agile as a jurisdiction, we have to ensure that there's a level of compliance across our businesses. So you need to notify now. So you've gotten this approval, you're now an approved small business, but you have responsibilities. If there's any change to your status within 21 days, the nature of the business has changed, you need to notify the minister. You have a responsibility to do that within 21 days that this has occurred. You need to submit financial statements within 3 months of your financial year end. Now, this comes back to compliance, accountability, managing your business. Keep good books and records available for annual review. You have to have financial statements available. So many people may have a receipt, they may have their invoices, they may have their deposit book statements from the bank, they may have everything, but have never collated them into financial statements or anywhere where you can say, this is the revenue I've collected. Yes, many companies do it, but all companies need to do it too, if you're going to be able to qualify under this act. And you have to notify the minister in writing within 120 days if the company ceases to operate or satisfy the requirements of the Small Business Development Act. Now, the onus is on you, the small business owner, to notify the minister. You don't want the minister to come and have a review and find out that the business has not been compliant, because then there are penalties. I haven't outlined those penalties in these slides in the interest of time, but we'll make sure that the Small Business Act is available. I'm sure the Small Business Association will ensure that you have your hands on it or tell you where to find it, so that you can then go to see what these requirements are. So you have responsibilities. And this status is not a forever status. This status is a status that you need to ensure that you retain over the life of the entity. And if you don't retain it over a 3-year period, well, then you no longer qualify as a small business on this act, as well an approved small business. So this status can also be revoked. So it's important. I think compliance is the one thing when I was going through and preparing for this that I was so mindful of as small businesses, is that you have to practice compliance. Before years gone by, you have a small business, nobody be checking to see if they've filed returns, checking to see if they've filed their annual returns, the corporate returns, annual returns with CAIPO, many things we hadn't done, but this will no longer be the case. Not if you're going to benefit from this reduced tax rate. So your status can be revoked if it's found that you provided false information on making your application, or there's an annual inspection scheduled and you don't cooperate, you're not sharing your records, or you refuse to advise that you have to change your business. So there's a lot of trust and integrity around this approval. Failure to file tax returns and pay national insurance. While I don't see any mention of filing annual returns in the Act, I think the agencies are linked now, and I think there will be some kind of cross-check to ensure that the annual returns have been filed. That is my understanding. While it may not preclude you from qualifying or being approved, you'll likely have to remediate. And it can also be revoked if the small business did not start operations within 6 months. So this tends to be, from my understanding, more for trading entities, but you can have entities where you anticipate that you've started up the company and you have your 3-year projections that were mentioned earlier. Once you qualify, you'll still be granted approval, but the business has to be active within a 6-month period. So just to give a general overview, because I'm mindful now that time is flying, seems as though it's passed quickly. The impact of this change in the regime on small businesses. Yes, 5.5% is a great rate compared to 9%. But small businesses now, if there's anything that you remember from this, you have to be compliant. Compliance now have to become second nature. Many of you are. Many of you have started. Many of you may not have to start. But even if you don't qualify under this act, it's a good practice from a regulatory perspective for you to understand the returns on the investments that you have made in your business. It's a good practice. So compliance with your corporate obligations and ensuring that you have paid, all of your taxes are covered, so it comes back to tax clearances, making sure that if at any day you can request a tax clearance. We already know that there are some things that will delay a tax clearance that may not be in your control, but you need to make sure that you're paying attention to your corporate obligations. Updates to changes in your organization or its status. Ensure you inform the relevant authorities, CAIPO being one, Small Business Association, the Ministry of Energy and Business Development being another. Going forward, if you haven't been keeping the best records, make it a practice to start doing it. Buy a reasonable accounting program and start good bookkeeping, because that is required. If you've done it before, kudos to you. Continue to do it and just do it better and better all the time. Cash flow management can't be ignored. Monthly prepayments may be coming. We haven't seen the final legislation, and we know there are some changes that have been made or tweaks, but cash flow management is not a bad thing, whether you have to make monthly prepayments to the Inland Revenue or not. It is not a bad thing. And just general corporate governance, how you manage your business, how you just manage your affairs as a company. These are things that the 5.5 is just pretty much icing on the cake. But in order to get it, you have to bake the cake. You have to add the ingredients. And these things really are the ingredients that you need to add to ensure that you can qualify for this new and lower tax rate. Now, going through the process, there are some practical considerations, and there are things that have been flagged. And I think it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that small business owners have mentioned the timing of the process to approval. But like I said, in my investigations and in discussions, timing is often affected by the submission of complete information. And then the next question, and probably the most important question of the day, is how will I benefit from this tax rate within TAMIS? What's happening? How do I get it done? It doesn't seem to be as easy, but you know what? Based on all that I've gathered, that is not your issue. Your issue is to make sure that you qualified as an approved small business. The agencies will take care of the rest. They'll be informed. This is my understanding that once you have been assigned your number, the relevant agencies that will be affected or will influence your business operations will be notified. So the new tax rate is a plus for small businesses compared to the corporate standard rate. Many would say, well, we were paying at 5.5 to 1 before, but it's a plus compared to 9%. But it comes with responsibility. It comes with things that you simply cannot ignore. If you are going to run your businesses successfully and be able to benefit your business, your employees, and to see the growth and development of your business going forward. Thank you very much for listening, and I am open to any queries. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, for a rather thought-provoking presentation. Colleagues, I'll share with you that I did ask Marilyn to give us an opportunity for our usual question and answer segment, and this is where we want to engage you now, because it is important that we have a conversation around this. So please go to the chat. You're not going to be unmuted. You go to the chat and you place your comments and or questions there. Marilyn, I already have about 5 that I want to engage you on. But let me preface this question and answer segment by making this point, that the Small Business Association is on record as recently as this week in our meeting with the Ministry of Business, Energy and Business Development. We're on record in making the point that this regime has to be reviewed. It has to be reviewed because you cannot have a situation where firms will only benefit, small firms that is, will only benefit if they are approved small businesses pursuant to the legislation. For a simple reason. We know what the data says in terms of the number of firms operating legally in the sector. And we know that since that provision of an approved small business has been introduced, 1999, I think amendments 2006, there are less than 200 approved small businesses in Barbados, less than 200 approved small businesses in Barbados. So when you consider that, you'll be getting less than 200 businesses benefiting from a 5.5% tax rate. It doesn't benefit government either, because then government can't get the revenues. And it doesn't benefit the sector because the sector can access the preferential rate. So in light of that, I have the assurance that government will be reviewing this matter. It has to be reviewed so that all parties in this relationship can benefit from the intention that has been introduced.
Correct.
Because you're right, Marilyn. For the small business, this is a plus. This is a benefit. 5.5% is a significant benefit. But you can't hang the hat too high. They can't reach it.
I agree. But I think the general intention is compliance, to regulate the industry, basically. But I don't think, like you said, the intention is not to hang the hat too high that you can't reach it. In my discussions with the ministry, even yesterday, as I was preparing for this, it is intended that companies be able to benefit from it. You just have to go through the process and provide complete information. But you have the experience of your registrants having gone through the process, and we discussed it. So I'm aware, but it is open. So I think everybody should apply. everybody should apply. As long as you qualify, apply, because you cannot benefit from the rate unless you apply. Whether everything starts to happen as we want it to happen, at the speed of light that we want it to happen, because no, everybody's interested in the small businesses being registered on the act. Everybody. So whether all the changes are made with the speed of light, it is in your best interest as a small business to register, as long as you qualify. The ministry, the agencies, their intention is not to make it onerous, from my understanding. They'll figure out how it happens and happens quicker. Whether they need resources to assist, who knows? I don't know, to be honest. But whatever they need, I have the understanding that it is not intended to be an onerous process. They want the small businesses to benefit.
Okay. All right, let's go to some of our questions. That's what you're seeing the chat. But here's Gail's question for you. First one, let's start with that one, because I did attempt to answer. I answered Deirdre's question rather earlier. Gail is asking, so it is not just qualifying under the act, but it also seems to be ongoing annual compliance to maintain your registration. In essence, that's what you said, right, Marilyn? So if you want to comment there. Yeah.
No, that's very good. Exact understanding of what it is. Your status does not just, it doesn't happen today and you're compliant today to get the number. You have to continue to be compliant, because this is a regulatory environment where we're coming to international standards within the corporate community. So yes, so to get the benefits, you have to be compliant. And if you aren't, there are actually penalties. So let me just start to mention, you'll go back to 9%. That will just be it. But if you do not do what is necessary to keep your status, you could end up paying penalties. If it's discovered that you have not been in compliance, you can end up paying penalties to the Inland Revenue for the variance between, say, 5.5 to 9% when you didn't qualify or meet the requirements of the act. You could end up, there are many incentives under the act as well, so customs duties and all, you could end up having to pay those. So it's in the best interest of entities to ensure that your status is maintained. And if it isn't, be open about it. Notify the minister that your status has changed. Otherwise, it could cost you.
Agreed. Gail, I can tell you that we have members actually that have the approved status, and every year, the documentation that they have to provide to the ministry, and sometimes we have to help them in that process. So yes, you have to annually provide information. And Marilyn using her accounting hat all the time, uses that C word, compliance.
I love it, because that's the only thing that you need to remember from this session. Compliance is what will allow you to benefit from this rate.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at what Philip is asking. I mean, Philip is asking about the types of businesses. He thought that there was a schedule. My understanding is that there isn't a specific type of business, but you can maybe respond to Philip's query. They said he thought that there was a type of business that could qualify for the approved status. Are you aware that there's a type of business in terms of a sector?
No, that's not my understanding. The one thing that I know there seems to be a strip of is where your business is and you're rental of plant and equipment. That's the one that comes to mind. But nothing else comes to mind. I may have to double check it, but no other type of business comes to mind, as long as you meet the criteria that was previously outlined.
I'm not aware of a type of business, just that you must be incorporated and you must meet 2 of the 3 general conditions that have been discussed in your presentation so far.
And don't forget the subject too. Don't forget the other conditions around where the investments go, making sure there's no larger group in the midst and those kind of things.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In terms of the ownership of the company, to try to avoid the big businesses setting up, these smaller entities to benefit. Agreed. So here's Gina's question. So once revenue is under $1 million, then the company still pays at the rate of 5.5%.
Once the company is under $1 million.
So if you're approved, once revenue is under $1 million.
If you are approved under the act. So don't ask me blanket questions like that. Come and answer will be no. It will always be qualified that you have to be approved under the act. to get the 5.5. That is the criteria. So yeah, Gina. So yes, if you are below $1 million and you qualify under the act, yeah, for sure, you get the 5.5.
Right.
That is the intention.
Yeah, right.
Because you want to
Okay.
develop small businesses, right? You want growth in the sector at the domestic level. I mean, not all small businesses are domestic, but that's where is intended to have growth so that we can pretty much support ourselves as a nation as well.
All right, Caroline is asking a question. I guess, in past ICAB, and I know that the executive director of ICAB, Lisa Padmore, is on the call. Let me say good morning to Lisa. If year-end financials are done in-house, do I then have to pass the info on to the ICAB accountant for audit over $1 million?
Well, the Companies Act doesn't require an audit for over $1 million. It's $4 million of gross assets and revenue, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it needs to be audited in order to be approved. As far as I'm aware, it's two separate and distinct things. That is the requirement under the Act to be approved.
Marilyn,
On
do
an
you need some
ongoing
help?
basis.
This is Lisa.
One
Do you need
minute.
some help? Okay.
Yeah, well, but 1 minute. But on an ongoing basis, I don't recall seeing that the entity has to have an audit on this Small Business Development Act. But I can double check that. Lisa, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I literally was just messaging the permanent secretary to confirm that particular point about the $1 million. So right now, as it stands, to get to be included under the Small Business Development Act, you do need the audit once it's over $1 million because it is in the current legislation. Framework hasn't changed. So anybody who does an immediate application will, yes, require an audited set of financial statements. And in this case, to answer some questions that are further on, I saw a question about whether or not it's the prior year, only the prior year. I don't think the act actually says it is the immediate year or several years before
Year
that.
immediately preceding.
So it's the year immediately preceding.
Yeah.
And yes, I would say that the individual should have a practicing certificate from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados. Thank you
Yes,
for allowing
they
me
did
to
say that as well, Lisa.
Yes, that's in the act. That's in the legislation.
Yes.
So let's go through the rest quickly. I know that time is on us. We have 5 minutes to 12. So if you can give us at least another 5 minutes, colleagues, we can maybe wrap up by 5 after 12. Maria is asking, do companies with foreign currency permit qualify?
I don't see why not. I haven't really thought about it, but I don't see why they wouldn't. I didn't see a restriction in relation to companies with FCPs, to be honest.
Okay. So we can just verify that with the ministry, Maria.
Yeah.
But
I
as
don't
it
see
is
any
now,
restriction.
we're not
There's nothing in the act that restricts
saying that
it.
there's a restriction, correct? All right. So I hope that you can look over in the chat there, Marilyn, because we have quite a few. I'm at Tatiana's
Is there
three-part
Tatiana
question.
is there a deadline? That one?
Yes,
is there a
I'm at
deadline
that
for
one now.
submission of applications for 2024 tax period? I don't know that there is a deadline, but I would say start doing it as soon as possible. Because if y'all are telling me that it takes a long time, but the ministry is telling me no, it should be fine. When you once you provided all the information, I would say the earlier you start, the better.
Right.
Is a certificate issued? Yeah.
I'm not so sure if Tatiana is an approved small business already, but if it is that she's going to be applying for approved small business status now, you're right. You gotta start now. It is important to start now.
And I am also going to say this just because it will probably become important where companies become approved in the middle of the year. I imagine there will be some proration of income. Because if say you were not approved in the earlier part of the year, but you're approved later, and maybe that's something that we can double check, I would imagine that it may be prorated where you pay some at 9% based on the income from the months before, and then pay at 5.5, but subject to correction. I haven't checked. I actually didn't think about it until she submitted her question. But there's no guidance right now, but that would be my, you know, innate response to say, I think it would be.
Right. And there will be some proration, as you rightly said, in response to her third query. There will be some proration of your income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I don't think nonprofits would be eligible. So you can just verify that for us for the next question we have here.
Okay. Yeah. Prepayment
Right.
system that you're.
It's not, I mean, the act is very specific. In the first part, it says you must be incorporated, huh?
Yes,
so
it does say that.
Is it a nonprofit company that the question relates to? I'm not sure. Soraya, if you're speaking of a nonprofit company, if you're speaking of a charity or foundation, you can maybe clarify that. Yeah. Right. So I'm not so sure if we can get through all of these, but
well, I can try to
let's take quickly. A look at yes, quickly. Yeah, I'm coming down the line. I think we dealt with all the others. We're at Kristen, so if we can maybe pick up from Kristen.
Why we haven't spoken
Corbin.
to the Cornelius's question. Cornelius asked,
let's go back
one
up.
above that.
Right, okay, prepayments.
Assume that you're in the same or better position as the prior year in terms of profitability. I think it's hard and unreasonable on small businesses. Those who impose the prepayment policy clearly have never run a business. All right, so that's an opinion. And I actually know Cornelius quite well. So I can see the passion with which she said that. But honestly, prepayments are really always due on the previous year's taxable income, and taxable income and not net profit, right? So there's a differentiation for me, because you could end up with a loss from a company perspective. So I understand what he's saying, but you could end up with taxable income. But I think it comes back to managing cash flow. And I know it's not a simple response, but I think that that's just part of the whole process of trying to get small businesses to start thinking that you need to have some structure behind your business. And that's not specific to him, but generally. Is the review or audit that is required due for the previous year only? This is for qualification. This is the application I think she's asking about. It said the year preceding the application. That's what it said. This is for applying, putting forth the application. For companies that do not currently keep good records, can they apply in 2025 after keeping good records in 2024? I assume I don't know if the ministry goes back to see what it was like in prior years. I really can't tell, but most companies, most auditors will look for comparatives and probably put on audited or something on the side, so you'll still have some idea, but it doesn't say. It really doesn't say, but it does say the minister can request any additional information that he requires to satisfy the position.
Yeah.
Entities that have can apply for your registration. Okay.
So we are Gregory now.
All right. I'm not seeing Gregory. I think mine is shifted.
Okay. So let me see if Gregory wrote to me directly. No, Gregory wrote to everyone. So Gregory is saying small businesses tax rate is 5.5% if registered on the SBDC. You know that with the definition and so on. But the SBDA requires any two of the three criteria, where this tax rate seems to be focused on only if you make $2 million gross. The challenge is that the rate ignores the practical instance where there's an exceptional year of sales. So do you think there's scope for keeping the two of three criteria for the 5.5% rate?
Well, the act also speaks to the fact that you'll have to exceed that criteria over a period of 3 years. I'd mentioned that earlier before the minister considers revoking. So if you tip over 1 year, my impression, and this is from the act, purely from the act, is not that you'll just lose your status as long as you're compliant. Of course, if you repeatedly exceed, it means that you're no longer within a micro or small business. So yeah, you probably will use it if you can. But you know what? Making more revenue is a wonderful thing. It means your business is growing. So.
Okay, so we're down to Emmanuel. Okay, I'm not so sure if you can see Emmanuel's.
I am not seeing any more questions, so let me see
You're
what I've
not
done
seeing any
now.
questions in the chat, so you've logged up from the
I'm
chat.
seeing questions, but I'm stuck somewhere. But you can ask me. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So we are by Emmanuel then. Emmanuel's question is this: the assumption posture of the tax authorities in relation to prepayment has always been the main issue with cash flow management for more small businesses. It takes no consideration of peak business periods. However, it is still unreasonable because of the reality that the actual tax liability for the reporting year may not exist. We know the pace of refund. So this is more comment being made. Very similar. I'm seeing this common sentiment though in several of the points made thus far. The fact is that you're right. Regulators don't have an appreciation for what happens on the ground. So whereas Marilyn, we understand very well and agree with the whole concept of compliance and the fact that government wants to have a regime, where firms are complying with laws so you don't get gray listed and blacklisted and all the other stuff going forward. There must be some striking of the balance and having an appreciation for practically what happens in the business on a day-to-day basis, or in this case, on an annual basis.
I understand, but you know what? I
Mhm.
plead the Fifth Amendment here, and I say, when you invite the revenue commissioner and all those people who control those things,
Yeah.
they'll probably, but I understand what's being said from the business perspective. However, it's difficult for me to respond to that query, or that comment rather. Yes, so I plead the Fifth
No
Amendment.
worry. We should know beyond. We have ICAB this month. We'll be going to the government agencies next.
I'm sure.
To be a part of this. So I'm saying that there's a conversation going on with Gene Chase, Celia, and Anderson. Law more so amongst those two than for us, it looks like. So let me go to maybe another question for Lisa from Anderson. There's a new audit standard coming for SMEs. Does the legislation contemplate this, or is he expecting too much? And this is a member of ICAB I know, so he may know something that we don't.
I did that for Lisa, but I'm not sure the legislation contemplates it. Like the legislation is old. So there are changes that will probably need, I think everything is going to evolve, but it's just going to take time.
Right.
I don't know if Lisa wants to jump in here, but.
Okay. All right, let's take this one from John Evelyn then. Maybe it's the second last one. Can you discuss the online application process and portal? This was mentioned at the tax update seminar. When is this going to be made available?
Yep, and I was there. I have no idea when it will be made available at this time. The information hasn't been shared.
That is the next challenge, Marilyn, that we find operating in the private sector. Yes, government wants to, encourage compliance. Yes, you want to have these enabling regulatory arrangements. But then when you go, you make these announcements and so on. Oftentimes, the organizations, VRA or whomever, that have to operationalize these proposals, oftentimes are not keeping pace with the proposals themselves, which creates a further burden on the business. It's a disincentive really to the business. I think that is really where he's going. Go ahead.
It is disincentive in a way, but I think we need to me, there's so many changes taking place, and I'm not taking the side of government or anywhere, because even as a service provider, we struggle. We struggle with the last minute things, but at the same time, I don't see that everything is going to happen all at once. So it will happen in time. It's intended to happen in time for when it's supposed to be applicable. But at the same time, we know that it doesn't happen with the speed that we would want it to efficiently comply.
Yeah.
I know that's probably a roundabout response, but it's the most honest response I can give, to be honest.
Right. All right, well, let's take the, I said second last just now. This might be a different second last, because I really want to get this point from Carrie. Carrie says, I just want to be sure I'm clear. Regardless of a business taxable income, the business should apply under the Small Business Act, so that if the business reaches taxable income or that bracket, the business is pre-qualified for the 5.5% tax rate.
The act
You
doesn't
understand?
talk to taxable income.
You understand what she's
The act
asking?
refers, yeah, but the act speaks to gross revenue, which is not taxable income.
Mhm.
Gross
Right,
revenue
but
is accounting profit. Well, not even accounting profit, is gross revenue, is accounting term. Taxable income is after you've adjusted your net profit. So I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I'm not understanding the question, but for me, there are two different things.
right.
To
What
be
I'm
able
understanding, that
to,
Carrie just wants to be clear and leaving this webinar today is that should small businesses really apply for the approved small business status pursuant to the Act, irrespective of what their taxable income is at this point, even if it's below the threshold? Are we recommending, or is the presenter really recommending that a business should go right ahead and seek approved small business status?
the presenter is not recommending anything. The presenter is showing information. The people, small businesses will have to make their decisions based on the objective of the business, what's going on, the growth projections of the business and all that. I'm making no recommendations. I'm merely sharing information.
Right. Because the whole concept of taxable income bracket, I mean, at the end of the day, you pay the 5.5% on your then you pay the 5.5% on the profit
On the taxable income, you pay on
of
the taxable
of the
income.
company, on the taxable
Yes,
income
but
of
you
the company.
qualify based on your gross revenue or gross assets. Two different things.
Right. So I went back to the question again. The impression is, some person will say, but I've not, I'm not even making a profit as a company.
Mhm.
And I remember we had that conversation here with some members who called in. My business is not even profitable.
Well, then maybe you don't need the 5.5%.
So if you're not making, if you're not right, so if you're not profitable, then the 5.5% really is not applicable. Some people hold that view.
Which is why it's important for small business owners to understand where the business is going, to understand the trajectory of the business and the objective. And whether do you stay in business and not make any taxable profits at all? Some businesses do, but they use it for other things. So I think it would have to be, I don't think anybody can make a decision for a small business except the small business itself, knowing where revenue comes from, the trajectory, like what they expect future cash flows to be and all that. Because even if you make losses today, tax losses today, and you project that you will have taxable income 3 years from now, you can still pay out 5.5% and use your tax losses for another 7 years. Restricted to 50%, yes. And I'm straight off notes of taxation, but there are benefits. So you have to know your business, you have to know the objective and where your business is going, where you anticipate how this business will grow, or your goals for this business, because you may have losses today and it may not seem useful, but 3 years from now, before the 7 years, these losses that expire, you may be able to use them very well to reduce so you'll get the 5.5, and you can also reduce your taxable income by 50% of your assessable income using your losses, depending on how many there are, how much losses you have, of course. So there's no disadvantage particularly, but it would have to be an assessment done by the small business itself. Right.
Okay. But one thing I will say as I conclude our session today is that we have a partnership with ICAB colleagues, and ICAB is prepared to provide, the members to assist in any way possible via tax clinics, consultations, provision of advisory services, etc., to help small firms navigate this journey. So rest assured that we have partners on board who will assist in this process. Lisa had to jump off, the executive director, but if there are any follow-up questions, she's asked us to compile them
For
and
sure.
forward them to ICAB, and we'll get the responses. So if it is there's some nagging issue you weren't clear on, you need additional information on a point, please send us the information at the SBA, and we would make sure that we get the necessary responses for you, get the accurate data. If you need the Small Business Act, you don't have a copy of it, of course we have it in the Secretariat. Let us know. We can shoot you an email with that in the event you want to read it. But please, a takeaway for me rather, is that unlike 30 years ago, when I personally started my own small business, the environment is so different today. And we have a responsibility now as business owners to pay attention to what's going on around us, pay attention to the environment that exists for business and the operation of business. This is why the SBA obviously organizes these webinars monthly. This is a part of it, but we have a responsibility to go further, to read up on stuff in our leisure time and so on, and to be intentional about it, because the environment is so different to 30, 40 years ago. And therefore we don't want that small firms run afoul of the law, that we breach regulations, etc., because the penalties now are coming down on you very, very heavily. And so we want that our firms are compliant. So with those comments, colleagues, I want you to go to the chat now. I've just placed a link there with the evaluation tool. Please go click on the link and answer a few questions for us. Just a few questions about the session today. It will help us with the evaluation process, and also it will help us in our planning in the future. As I said, every month you can join us here on the platform for one of these informational sessions, and so your feedback helps us to plan for the future as well. So as we plan for the remaining months to come in this year, 2024, we want to make sure that we are spot on with topics that are relevant to you. In the event that we didn't get to deal with a question today, no problem. We're going to take out the chat and see if we can shoot you back a response. But I see that there's an ongoing conversation with some of our members. Very good. One thing I know, I can trust Anderson, I can trust Dawn from Resilia, and I see Jean Chase Seeley in that conversation as well. These are all accountants, by the way, all members of ICAB, by the way, and they're having a robust conversation on this sideline. So that's good, that's healthy, I believe. So we want to wrap up now, folks, because we've exhausted our time, and we will definitely look to see what follow-up we will have for sure. I really want to get the BRA if you on this call, anyone from the BRA in this call, we definitely need to get you on this platform to engage in this conversation in the not too distant future. So Marilyn, it has been a pleasure. Any parting words from you before we close?
My favorite word: compliance, compliance, compliance. So it has certainly been a pleasure to be here today to be part of this session. But honestly, I think the small businesses we'll have to adapt. Small businesses will have to adapt for survival. To avoid, you have cash flow issues already, non-avoidance or avoidance, of obligations, and not, ensuring that you're up to date on your obligations will cost you more. So if you want to continue your small business, compliance is very important, because if you don't comply, you will end up losing much of what you've earned. That's it for me.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, and thank you again, members of the SBA partners and friends. Thank you for joining us in this month of February, this leap year, for our webinar. Look out for the next one to come in the month of March. We continue the conversation. We continue to update you. I know the next topic on the agenda I see is trending now, the issue of the construction and the carving out of space for the small contractors so that they can earn revenue and provide for their families and businesses and so on. That's an area that is of concern to the association, so you can listen out for what we have to say on that as well. So thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you to ICAB for
You're welcome.
partnering with us in this session today. Thanks to our members for staying on the call. Remember, please go to the chat now and complete the very short evaluation tool on today's webinar. So that's it from us at the Small Business Association. Again, it has been a pleasure to continue to enjoy your day and your week as you enter into the month of March. God bless you all. Stay safe, everyone. See you on the next occasion. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye.